Welcome to another edition of Elevate Your Grind, brought to you by the Cannabis Lab. I am your host, Todd Rosales, and thank you everybody for joining us. I know it's been a while since you've seen my lovely face. I have a very busy job now, so it requires a lot of me. No, I'm just kidding. No, folks, I'm just trying to figure out how to do this show with a new gig that requires me to travel around the country, as well as 2 young kids and everything else. So just like you sitting at home, I am human. I am trying to figure it out. We will try to get you the show as often as possible. I promise you we will have a minimum of once a week, but I want to be able to talk to you guys so much more because it helps feed my ego. But this episode has been brought to you by Contempo Specialty Packaging. I knew it was Contempo, and I knew that they have a great product because if you look right here, I have all of their beautiful packaging right here on my desk, right? You guys know how I feel about most of the packaging in the industry. In fact, I actually went out to California recently, and just to show you, right, for a pre-roll. It was a very good pre-roll, don't get me wrong. Loaded, you guys make a great product, but literally had this box and then another tube inside it and another tube inside that. Literally 3 layers of junk for me just to get to a pre-roll, right? Contempo is doing better. On top of that, they are making packaging and they have offerings made out of 100% pure hemp. That's right, folks. We're finally wrapping cannabis in cannabis. It just makes sense. Contempo comes from a 40-year packaging background, servicing the top brands in the world of fashion. You can tell from when they made this little guy right here, very fashionable, very pretty. That's actually one that I'm going to keep going. Actually, I'm keeping all of this and using it. But, you know, they come from 40 years of packaging backgrounds in fashion. They have 4, probably close to 5 at this point, years of experience in the cannabis world as well. They work with many of the largest cannabis operators in the industry, and their 100% hemp offering, which is this guy right here, I think it says 100% hemp on it, is only one of their many offerings. They have really cool dog walker tins. They've got full-size pre-roll tins. They've got, if you want a lot of pre-rolls, or these are for edibles, they've got these for vape carts, or I like them for a single pre-roll. They have tincture boxes. They have 8 jars. They have all of that. They have a ton of offerings. So if you're getting started in the cannabis industry, just like I am, please visit contempopackaging.com. Many of you, a lot of my friends in the industry, have already reached out and asked to be connected to Contempo. If you guys want to be connected to them personally, please reach out to me. But if not, check out contempopackaging.com. All right, done with the read. The guys at Contempo really are great. You guys should check them out. So today's guest, this is really cool. So I met today's guest well before I started the podcast. Actually, when the podcast was just an idea in my head. So for those of you who don't know, I started in this industry with a company called the Cannabis Dealmaker Summit and the company called Bonaventure Equity. I traveled a lot for that, and I got to go to a really cool event out in San Jose, which was the National Cannabis Industry Association event, the NCIA. Back then, I had the idea of doing a podcast because I met a ton of great people, and my boss at the time, well, fuck it, I don't really like him. He was a bit of an egomaniac, so I figured it would feed his ego to do a podcast and talk to all these great people, and he can talk how great it was. And I was going to be behind the scenes and book guests and do all that stuff just because I had just discovered Rogan, and I was really into podcasting. I'm a huge Howard Stern fan. That's where it comes from, right? Well, long story short, that never came to fruition until I ultimately met Rob, told him he should do the podcast. If you've met Rob, doesn't have that same need for attention or ego. And Rob's like, no, you should do the podcast. So I don't know what that says about me personally. Maybe he thinks I was the same as my old boss. But long story short, 155 episodes later, here we are. So I met today's guest at that event in San Jose at the NCIA event. We talked for a while. It was right outside the Cannabis event at the San Jose event. It was back when I thought it was cool to wear suits to a conference. So everyone just assumed I had money because I was the only idiot who wore a suit. But it was a fun gig. Come full circle, he is now a guest on the show. So coming to us because he's about to go to sleep, live from Mumbai, please welcome Eric Delisle, the founder and CEO of Bloomstack. Eric, thank you for joining me.
Hey, brother. Thanks for having me. And I got to say that your vision worked out great because I actually love the podcast and you're doing an awesome job. So just a little stroke for your ego there, but I'm just saying.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But you know, be honest, man, it's this industry and the people that we have on the show. Like, again, you and I at that time, like there's no reason that I needed to sit and talk to you for about 20, 30 minutes, but you were interesting. You had a great background. What you guys were doing was great. And it's just that those conversations are really what made me comfortable doing this show. Also, given the fact that we're COVID, so I'm literally sitting in my office. You saw my family was in here 10 seconds ago, and I'm just having a conversation. You know, you're on my wall here, but it was conversations like that started it. I'm really interested to see where Bloomstack has come in these past 2 years, because I'm seeing you. I mean, obviously you're over in Mumbai. You guys are crushing it. You were doing very, well back then. It was a great idea. So before we get into it, I want you to give a little background on Bloomstack, what it is, because it is very all encompassing for the industry. I come from a tech background, and I always debate myself. It's kind of the nature and nurture of tech. We're in an industry where not a lot of the major players are developing software for you. You don't really have your Microsofts, your Oracles, or any of that. So I always wonder if we're at an advantage or a disadvantage that software for this industry is literally created just for this industry, because it has to be. I think now that, 2 years down the road from when I first started looking at it, I do think it's a blessing. And, obviously Bloomstack is of that ilk. So give us a little background about the start of Bloomstack, the different modules and everything, just a super high level overview. And then we can kind of go into your background and the company.
Yeah, man. So, Bloomstack basically, I can swear on this podcast, right?
I think so.
All right. So
yeah, absolutely,
man, it's just, one of the things that I was doing when you met me at the NCIA conference is I was still 2 years ago, we were still kind of doing our own market research to see if this was really where we wanted to invest time and money. And it totally gave me the confidence, because I realized the clusterfuck that is going on in IT in the cannabis industry. It's brutal. Mm-hmm. And now, having been in it for a few years, we really see it with our own clients and just with the pain. I go on this app Clubhouse now and get in some of these rooms, and nonstop people are bitching about metric or bitching about,
is Clubhouse still big for cannabis? I remember when it first came out, I was all over that. And then I'm just like, who has the time for all these conversations? I wanted to so bad. And I had a friend who I worked with. He was single and young. And I looked at him, I'm like, bro, like, I don't know how you have the time to sit in these rooms, but
I can tell you.
So big.
No, I can tell you what it is. I'm here in Mumbai, and it's basically a 12-hour difference, 12 hours ahead of California. So when I get up in the morning, it's dark 30. It's getting late in California, and it's midnight, 1, 2. That's when all the cannabis rooms are. They're all smoke sessions. They're all smoke sessions. They're all smoked up and talking about business and talking about just whatever cannabis oriented. So it's kind of funny to get that, because if I was back home, I don't think I would ever hear any of them. I'd be asleep.
Yeah.
So, but what we ended up doing to the question, is we realized that. Well, actually, let me back up 2 seconds. A really good friend of mine from high school was starting in 2017. He was starting a big project. He was getting licensed in Lancaster to do about a $7 million implementation for a vertically integrated company there. And he had called me up. I've been a tech entrepreneur for many years, and he called me up and asked me for some advice on, what he could do to deal with this metric stuff that he had heard about and all these other things. And that was the first time. That's what made me pay it so close attention, because as I got into it with him and I realized what his options were, they weren't really good, because what it required him to do was cobble together a bunch of software solutions to make the company itself work, make it comply with the state and federal governments for 280E and stuff like that. And I just realized that it was going to be a mess, and sure enough, it is. So, Franwell, the makers of the metric system, are from Lakeland, Florida, not too far from my house in Orlando. And anyway, make a long story short, I just realized that there was an opportunity to really help a lot of people. And as Zig Ziglar says in life, if you can just help enough other people get what they want, you never have to worry about what you want. So that's how we started the company. It was really based on this premise. And I had a lot of experience as an entrepreneur of 35 years as a tech entrepreneur since 1993. So I knew both sides, the things that people trying to get things off the ground and go do their dream, and what the reality of tech was, instead of being bamboozled by techies selling people stuff that really isn't appropriate for them. So that's where the germination of Bloomstack came. And when you and I first talked, we were really just still doing all that research. And I was showing, at the time when you and I talked, I was showing the system that we had built over the previous couple years, and then we took off with Bloomstack after that.
Yeah, man. I remember. I remember your whole team being from Florida. One of your partners, actually, I think, being from the Lake Worth area. I remember the conversation so vividly.
Yeah, Matt.
It's funny that you talk about these cannabis companies having to cobble together all these different platforms just to be able to function, because I've spent a lot of time in my career consulting small businesses on IT, and it's crazy because from an IT professional standpoint, you want them to be like a small enterprise, right? You want them to use all the cybersecurity and all the MFA and all this stuff, but in practicality, it's not always doable, if you will, right? I mean, I can tell you right now, for example, my team at Heisman, there's 5 of us, 6 of us, right? For us to have 6, 7 different platforms and for everybody to have a log into that, right? It wouldn't make sense. It would get crazy. You'd have to figure out what's where, what's for what. I mean, we already have a lot of platform in itself, as far as like your HR platform is one thing, right? Your payroll, your email system. Most small companies will try to do everything within an Office 365 or within a Google Apps. And then as they scale, and it becomes uncontrollable in that, they'll start adding more systems that are specific to it. But whereas the cannabis industry might start off with, I'll call them a handful of power users, right? Because you might have more trimmers and other people like that. But people who are actually on the computer start off with a handful of people, and then you have to have so many different systems just for compliance. And then on top of that, the state is forcing you to use whatever system that they picked to track, right? So you've got Metric, you've got BioTrack, and there might be some others out there that I'm unaware of, but for the two majors,
Leaf, MJ Freeway,
and for the most part, I know early on these companies weren't the greatest about opening up their APIs. So it must have been very.
By the way, not only not open their APIs, just speaking truth here, not only not opening their APIs, having different versions of APIs for their own product that they're selling commercially in the market, and the API that they give to developers that they're supposed to by law. So, there's that going on too.
Yeah. So that's what's crazy to me, is there's this inherently flawed IT system being forced upon an industry that is already having its challenges with regulation and everything else. And, for the most part, this is agriculture, which is not a tech savvy industry in itself. So, I love what you've done is accomplishing giving all the units that a company would need almost through a singular login. I mean, if you would have just done that in its own, it would have been great. But when you were putting together Bloomstack, I mean, what were the ways that you were developing it? Was it kind of more so interviewing the people that needed to use it through the beta and figuring out what happened? Or were you also borrowing the best of what's out there? Like for we're going to take the best of QuickBooks for the accounting section. We're going to take the best of this for that. I mean, just kind of give me insight into the development, because you've done similar to what Akerna has done without having to buy 6, 7 companies.
Well, no, Akerna hasn't come even close to what we're doing, to be clear. They have
they're
7
just
different
seats to sale at this point. They don't have the tax and all that, right?
No, it's not just that. I mean, they have 7 different silos of systems that they've cobbled together too, and they're selling. So instead of you picking your own 7 systems, Akerna did it for you. Yeah, exactly. And they started the entire base with the one that was hacked and has had so many problems with MJ Freeway. I really shouldn't say so much because Mom says if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything. To be honest, we took a radically different approach. Number one, I was in a situation where I wasn't leveraging, reverse mergers into public shells to try and make things look good. We're fine exactly where we are, and we don't owe anybody anything, and we can just build the best platform out there, which is to be honest with you, Todd, we don't. One of the things that I tell our engineers all the time, and frankly, everybody in the company, is I remind them, listen, nobody gives a shit about our software. Nobody cares about our software. They care about what they're doing.
Yeah.
They care about the business that they, blood, sweat, and tears to try and get the license, or the money that they cobbled together to be able to pay for the whatever, or they're worried about the next competitor around the corner, or, you know what I'm saying? That's what they care about. They don't care about our software. and they're never gonna, and we don't want them to. In fact, one of the metrics that we use internally is how fast can somebody do something. If you have to do something, let's say you have to create a shipping manifest that's reported to the BCC and emailed to your client before your driver leaves the warehouse. That's a common task that has to happen a lot. Well, our goal is to see how fast we can get the user into the system and out of the system as fast as possible, because we don't want you in there. You don't want to be in there, so why would we want you in there? And that's really a guiding force behind everything that we're creating. In fact, we have a new, a brand new application interface layer. Not to get too geeky, but where we've really are pushing everything that we can to be mobile first. So every interface and every interaction that you're doing. Listen, if you're a trimmer or if you're working in the warehouse packing boxes, you don't want to work on a laptop. Number one, if you're a driver, you're out visiting dispensaries, you don't want a laptop on your seat on the side. If you could do it all in your phone, that's awesome. So to answer your question, how do we develop a lot of this? So the platform itself, we had actually built for a company called JH Audio, Jerry Harvey Audio. And for any of the listeners, if you want to see a cool website and a cool thing run on Bloomstack, go to jhaudio.com. And this is the #1 manufacturer in the world of custom in-ear monitors for everybody that that's famous, that's a performer. They're probably our client. So, whether it's Lady Gaga or Eminem, they're customers of JH Audio. They're the kind of super fancy headphones that they wear when they're on stage. So the problem, though, that they faced is, like a lot of companies, they grew up organically. Jerry's brilliant engineer, inventor. And, once they got up to a few $1 million in sales, 65 or so, 70 employees, they had all the usual suspects. They had QuickBooks Online doing their accounting. They had Salesforce.com for CRM. They had WordPress running their website. They had UberCart running their shopping cart. They had countless spreadsheets and Word documents and paper around the office that they were using to manage this company. And it was horrible. I mean, they had file boxes from floor to ceiling that were literally screen prints of the interface in Salesforce, or a screen print of the UberCart order. And they would take them all, they'd print them, because there was no way for the data to talk to each other, but they had to cross-reference, So they would literally take screenshots, print them, put them in paper folders, and that's how they were managing the company. So I was brought in as I was exiting my cybersecurity company to help these guys out, and we replaced all of those systems and with what eventually became Bloomstack. Now, when we entered the cannabis market, I was actually in a position where I was trying to decide if I wanted to go after the regular enterprise market, but then this meeting that I told you about with my friend changed everything. And that's where I realized, man, here's a massive opportunity, because as you said, Microsoft, Oracle Business Suite, NetSuite, SAP, none of these guys really give two shits about what's going on in cannabis. And I did. I mean, my dad, died from cancer for a couple of years ago, and the only thing that helped him was smoking. And I've been a grower myself, and love the plant, and on and on and on. So when we got to it, we launched Bloomstack after doing a ton of market research, meeting with people at NCIA, different operators, finding out what their challenges were with the existing software platforms that were out there. And we signed our first contract with an operator out of Los Angeles. And we worked with them hand in hand as what we call a design partner. So we've actually carried this on over the last 2 years, working only with a handful of design partners like Humboldt Farms. We recently integrated with Flocana and Leaf Data, I think. But as we did this, what we did is we focused on not the things that were common to every business that you can find in Microsoft Dynamics. You can get it in Oracle Business Suite. If you just want something that tracks inventory level, you can get it there. If you just want something that, tracks a contact of a customer, you can get it in another platform. But what if you have drivers that are going out, making a bunch of deliveries to retail stores and coming back with backpacks filled with cash? Which commercial software platform helps you handle that really well? Well, it turns out Bloomstack does, because our first client, it was one of their big problems. It turns out it's a problem for a lot of distributors, but yeah, it was taking on average 2 to 3 hours to reconcile a driver when they came back with their cash at the end of the day. And on average, they'd have between 12 and 17, 18 drivers. Man, that's a lot of manpower, to reconcile that. From 2 to 3 hours, and God forbid if they had a mistake, because they had so many different systems that they were using. They had Fishbowl for inventory. They had, QuickBooks and Salesforce, all these things. It could take 2 to 3 days for them to figure out a discrepancy in a payment that came through. When they started using Bloomstack, once we got them implemented, and it took us about 4 or 5 months to get them implemented, our first one. And once they went live, they started reconciling their drivers in average 15 to 20 minutes when they'd come back. And they almost had zero. They never actually, not that I know of, they never had an error. So because our system's real time, as soon as the driver shows up at a dispensary, he's there, he gets the authorization right from the store manager, the buyer, or whatever, and even can handle credit terms in the field. Here's another one for you. So let's say you're using Microsoft Dynamics, and it helps you, with the sales invoice and the sales order, and maybe you have to cobble something together special to get the manifest out. But now you show up at the dispensary and the guy says, "Oh, dude, I didn't want all these Jack hair carts. We got too many of them. Send these back." Well, by law, they now have to redo the manifest, because they have to remanifest the return product. Now they have to issue a return on the sales order. How do you do all that in the field? And so we made that literally like one click, doable on your phone when you're out there with the driver app. And that's an example. I mean, there's many, many, many other examples, but that's one example of a really deep problem statement that we realized in the industry. And there's a lot of things like that, dealing with your inventory, batch management, package ID management, moving things through discrete manufacturing or process manufacturing for oils or whatever you're making. It gets pretty deep.
So many different things to unpack there. I mean, I love a lot of what you're saying, and the examples that you're giving are great, because as we're building out, and I got to be careful how much of the business plan that I share for Heisman on here, but as we're building out Heisman, some of the concerns that I have personally are being able to track inventory and understand my sales. I mean, at my time at Springbig, that's what I was doing with brands. Brands were so far removed from their end customer sales that they almost functioned as a B2B business, even though they were B2C. So here you are with the challenge of building a brand that is B2C, but you're basing your sales metrics and your forecast and everything else on B2B, because it's what are people buying, right? And you don't know how much they're selling through, what they're selling it at, if they're selling it at a discount, if it's selling at full price. So here I am, I'm setting my my wholesale prices based on what I think it's being sold at, and maybe they're not happy with me because they have to sell it at a discount, right? And I don't have any access to that information. I don't know, hey, I want to go run, like, for example, and we'll call ourselves a celebrity brand. I know there are a lot of celebrity brands that went big and wide for their launch and then fell on their face because they couldn't follow up with inventory. Even if they did well, a celebrity brand is going to be scrutinized from the get-go. But even if they did well, they couldn't follow up on their inventory because they weren't able to track it, right? So anything that gives you insight into that, especially as a brand, I mean, we were doing some of that at Springbig. If you ran at a certain store, we'd give you insight into it. And if you looked hard enough, you can figure out your inventory. I don't know if they've changed it since I left, but these are huge challenges that you're addressing for both brands and cultivators and distributors for that matter, right? There are a lot of blinders along the supply chain that make it tough to do business, make you have to operate as a different business than what you are.
But by the way, just to interject real quick, everything that you just said is not only true, but I just want all the listeners, because a lot of them are operators, but a lot are not. A lot are they're around the industry and they don't really know what operators have to deal with, because everything you just said is true for any business. But on top of that, in the cannabis industry, with the same exact examples that you're using, how do you book samples? When you send samples, you have to manifest them and you have to actually account for them differently. There's a different taxation on them. The way that you account for them in inventory, the way that you report on them, if you're audited, how you have to deal with it is very different. So again, there may be these tools that are out there for any kind of business handling things, but that's one of the things that we really wanted to focus on is say, okay, but there's these unique things happening with cannabis that are not being addressed, and that's important too, as you're having to deal with all this stuff.
No, you make a great point, because other things that we've talked about, we're a sports minded company. I feel like this is going to turn into a meeting between you and I, and everyone else is just going to look at it. But we're a sports minded company. So if we do activations and tailgates and stuff, and obviously we want to give out samples or provide product, there's a lot of red tape that we have to go through just to get access to our own product. Right. That's what's crazy to me. So, I spoke to a few friends and I don't know the exact way that we're going to work it out, but they're like, there's different ways you can do it. You have a close relationship with the dispensary, you send it to them, they sell it to you at cost, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of different ways, but you literally have to jump through hoops just to get access to your own product to be able to share it with people, which is nuts.
And if you do it wrong, you're risking the company.
Exactly.
That's worse. The way the states have done this, they really have everybody by the balls. And frankly, that's one of the things I'm championing here in India. Is I'm really trying to help these governments, the state governments and the central government here, not make the same mistakes that we've made in the U.S. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. Listen, it's great for my business, that it's so hard to actually comply with all these state regulations, right? But there's enough for everybody. I'd rather it be easier for everybody and the industry grow.
No, I agree. But then on the other side of it, I really love what you're saying about how you've designed the software with the user experience in mind. When you say nobody gives a shit about our software, they care about what they're doing and how our software essentially helps them get that done quicker, everything mobile first. And, when going back to my sales days in the software world, the reason that I was more successful than others is because everyone always talked about how great the software was. Yeah. I talked about how much easier your job was going to be if you used it and the things. Yeah. And I would ask them, what are your tasks? I go, this is how you're going to do your job in this. See how much easier it is. And they loved it. Right. Everybody else would be like, you can do this and you can do this and it will spin and it will whiz and the lights will shine and everything else. It's like, no one gives a shit. Right. No one's buying.
And AI.
And you got to have AI. Right. So, I love the fact you're like, listen, we care about just making their lives easier, making sure that they can do their job faster. And then in this industry, there are very few of us that sit behind a desk all day, right? Very, very few of us. And even for the most part, I'm a VP of business development. You would think in any other industry, I would sit behind a desk most of the day, but we're on planes, we're on the road, we're out meeting with people. I learned more recently that I have a laptop here. It's basically become a desktop. I try to work off of a tablet and for the most part, my phone, because if I'm in a grow, if I'm meeting with people, this is always on me. I'm one of those weird people. I hate having stuff on my body. I don't like bags or any of that. So, the fact that you're making it easy, and if this is the device that I can use to have all the insight into my business, to me, that's one of the most attractive things we have. I know you're not the only people doing it, but for someone to look at what we'll call an ERP system, because to me, that's what you're ERP for the cannabis.
Yeah, sure.
ERP is one of the last types of applications that gets moved to mobile, because most of the people that use it are the desk people. They're the ones that are figuring out the processes. It's the accountants and everything. The inputs are coming from the field and everything else, but the people who are in there processing it. So it's very rare to see an ERP system that is mobile and cloud-based first.
Well, this is part of our secret sauce, frankly, is that, it was first the desktop ERP. So it still has the power of sitting there with multiple screens and looking at analytics and having, big amounts of data that you have to deal with when you're a knowledge worker. But that's just not the case for the guy that's packing the box. But he needs access to the same ERP system, right? So he's got to know what his pick list is. And he's got to know that he's got 17 boxes to pack, by the time the drivers are ready to go out. And so why are you sticking that guy on one of these systems with all the menus and all the, I mean, a lot of these systems have menus for their menus for their menus, right? And our idea at Bloomstack was, when the warehouse worker has to pack boxes, then he should have a pick list tool, and that's it. So that the only thing he sees is, I need another 50 carts of this. I need a 24 brownies. Put that in, scan it, get the package ID, make sure it's in that box, and I got a green light that says this box ready to go. Which then, because it's an ERP and then some, can do all the automatic triggers. Like, okay, now it can print the driver packet automatically. There's still a lot of paper going on out there in the field, right? Which maybe includes the route map, and it includes a copy of the shipping manifest, and it includes a copy of their invoice, includes a copy of their account statement if they have accounts receivables and terms, which have become more common. It even might print out, let's say, a store inventory list for brands that are doing things like consignment now. This has become a big move as so much product has flooded into the market. Brands are out there doing consignment all day. So how do you manage that? How do you manage your own inventory in somebody else's store? Little things like that.
You're making the cannabis industry just more what it needs to be: agriculture, retail, CPG. It's all of that, and anything that helps. It's funny. Like, I honestly feel like you're developing this for me. I feel like I'm probably a little worse than the average IT user, but I remember, I come from a sales background, right? And I'm an old school seller. I use whiteboards. I've got handwritten notes, and a lot of my stuff is on the phone and everything else. So, my biggest flaw has always been using the CRM system. And we had dynamic CRM back in my IT days. And I used it and I was always the person, I put in whatever was required to get to the next step. That's all, because it took so much time to just update everybody in CRM, but then I'd have pipeline review calls, and then I would have quarterly reviews and everything else. I'm like, I'm giving you the same freaking information 9 times. You want me to fill out CRM? You're not going to CRM to get it. So I'm not going to put it there. Right. Even my last job was Spring Big. And sorry guys to admit this after I'm gone, but I put the bare minimum in Salesforce because it was kludgy. It never worked well. And then when they gave me a lead gen guy, I would purposely pass all the leads that I generated to him, let him get paid on them, because he would put it in Salesforce for me. So that was worth it to me, to push off my success to somebody else, just so I didn't have to operate in Salesforce. So when I hear you talk about the mobile first approach and getting people in and out, that's perfect. That's what I think most people need these days. We're inundated with technology. So the most that we can do our jobs and not have to focus on software, I think it makes everyone more efficient. So that's why I love hearing it. I mean, I can even show you, I still operate that day over here. I have a huge whiteboard with everything I need to do on it, because listen, I got 2 monitors here, but if I can just sit here and stare at this whiteboard and see the things I need to go, for some reason, that's how my mind starts, piecing everything together.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you a question now. You happen to be in Mumbai. You talk about the regulations in India now. Where is Bloomstack operating? Are you in every cannabis market? Have you guys selected a few that you specialize in, or?
Yeah. We're still in private beta. Okay. So, unfortunately for everybody that may listen to this podcast and rush over to just sign up to use Bloomstack, it doesn't quite work that way yet. It will in 2022. When we got going with this, one of the things that I demanded from this venture was that we have raving fans. And as we got into it and we got into parts of the system that we thought were okay, when they got out into the field, they didn't work exactly the way that like you said with the CRM system. As a matter of fact, so we have a CRM system built into Bloomstack, but it's not up to snuff for me. So, if we can't eat our own dog food and we can't really think that this is the best thing out there, then I don't want anybody else to buy it either. Yeah. Right. Now, don't get me wrong, it does 80% of what Salesforce does, but to your point, the problem that we're fixing is what you just said, having to deal with interfaces where, it takes so much time and effort to put in all these little things. It doesn't help your process. So our approach is real straightforward. Right now, what we did was we kind of, I funded this whole thing in the beginning. Back when you and I had met, we weren't looking for funding or anything because I was funding it. Then, as the vision started to grow, we took in a friends and family round, and actually today, this is live, but today our WeFunder thing closes today in a few hours. Like I think, depending on what time it is over there, I think it's like 7-8 hours from now.
We're at 10:15 a.m. right now.
Yeah, so it's 11 o'clock tonight it ends. So it's almost 12 hours. So it's a wefunder.com/Bloomstack if you want to see the thing that we're doing up there. But the point is this, that what we identified was we were about 70% of the way there with our first clients. And I realized that with just a little bit more working the same exact way with a few more design partners, we'd get 110% of the way there. So what we're doing now is we have a new program we just launched called the Bloomstack Beta Partner Program. And it's a program where we hand select only a handful of companies. So we raise this money to invest it in the companies that we're working with. So as an example, it costs a bit of money to do custom development work and to do custom implementation, right? And there's a lot of operators who, if they're rolling in cash and they got billions to throw around, that's one thing. But there's a lot of entrepreneurs and startups that just aren't in that situation. So we're coming to the table and we're investing about $50,000 per partner on our side, because the platform is good for everybody as it gets better. And it's important to note, we're launching Bloomstack, and it's actually already available as 100% free and open source project for the industry. So anybody that's a super geek, if they know how to do this kind of stuff, they can actually go to our GitHub repos, download all the code, and install it in servers and get to work. Early next year, we're going to launch a big developer program, and we're going to encourage IT shops and people like that to build on the platform. For cannabis operators. But I was just going to say, so that's our goal right now. So the goal is to get we'll be picking our next 3 design partners by the end of this month. So about 9 more days. And we'll have them decided on the beginning of October. So first week of October, we'll take on 3 more. But then the full rollout will happen the beginning of 2022. That's when we're going to open it to the world.
So I can tell that you have a deep technology entrepreneurship background, because so many people in the cannabis space, especially from a software standpoint, I think rush to market to try to get market share. As more and more markets were opening up, people needed to get their MVP out there, the minimal viable product, when in the reality of it is, even though this industry is nascent, the people who are working in it are not. They've worked with technology before. They've worked with software. And at the end of the day, the only thing that people will adopt software for is going back to user experiences. How well does it help me do my job, right? So even though you may get early market share early on, right? You might maybe 75% of the market, whatever it is, if your software sucks, it sucks, and people are going to change regardless at some point in time if there's something better out there. I love what you guys are doing, the fact that you're selecting the companies that you think your software will work best with, partnering with them, taking their feedback, investing with them, making suggestions, truly forming a partnership with them before letting this go out wide to the rest of the country and to the rest of the industry, right? To me, that's how you develop an enterprise product. That's how you develop something that's going to be an industry standard versus something that's going to have a nice market share and then either be purchased by someone and fizzle into another name, into, be absorbed into something else and they'll take the best function, or something that fizzles out completely. So, and I'm sure as an entrepreneur, that's got to be very hard to be patient that way, because you have funds that you've raised, you have investors there, and, it's so tempting to just flip on the monetization switch and go wide, especially in tech, because it's a lot easier to get someone a piece of software than it is a physical product. So I really respect what you guys are doing. I'm excited to see this get bigger in the next year.
Yeah, we're in a really cool position. I mean, to your point, I've already been in discussions because of our NDA. I can't name who it was, but we actually took them on as a client, and we got into discussions about them buying Bloomstack for like $50 million, the cannabis division. To your point, what's more valuable to me is the idea of building something that just is exactly what everybody needs.
Yeah.
Because if we can pull that off, if we can do that, the sky's the limit, really. I mean, I don't have to do anything except help everybody get what they're dying to have. And as we go out there and we talk to people, we find out that that's exactly what's happening. Everybody is bitching about, I won't name them all, but the usual suspects that are out there. People are not happy with these software platforms, let alone the government platforms, Metric and stuff. So it's for me as an entrepreneur for this long. I just turned 50 this year, so I got a half century under my belt, and I made those mistakes early on. Early in my career, I pushed shit out the door that wasn't ready. And it backfires, so this time we're doing things very differently, and we're super excited about the way stuff is coming out.
That's really cool, man. No, you're right. I mean, in today's age, people grow up with it, 10, 15 years ago, maybe you can get away with it. But when everybody's growing up with technology and app interfaces are so familiar on your phone and everything else, you don't have the ability to push out something that doesn't look good and doesn't work well and then improve upon it. It has to be ready for prime time, in my opinion, man. I think what you guys are doing is great. And so we're getting up to the top of the hour here. Is there anything we might have missed that we want to talk about with Bloomstack? I know the cool thing that I saw on your website too, and if you want to touch on this, is it looks like long term you guys are going to make a social aspect to this as well too. Like there's going to be a community around Bloomstack. People are going to be able to interact with each other. So it's going to go further than just helping you control your business. It looks like just within the platform itself, you'll be able to get insights that you can leverage for your business as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do this for you because of for this podcast and for us doing this. So if anybody listens, they'll get a few inside sneak peek things that we don't talk about. I actually haven't talked about this publicly yet at all. But underlying Bloomstack, there's actually an entire marketplace framework. So once we release it, and clients that are kind of like in enterprise, you have EDI for retail interchange between vendors and suppliers and retailers. Everybody that's working on Bloomstack will actually have a common interface. So if you're a brand and you're running on Bloomstack, you'll actually be able to publish your brand up to the marketplace. And if somebody else in some other place is a licensed retailer and they want to browse available brands, they'll be able to do that with Bloomstack. The analytics engine in Bloomstack is second to none because we don't only have one silo, we have all of your silos of data. So remember, Bloomstack runs your accounting, Bloomstack runs your inventory, Bloomstack is your HR system. You can do payroll in Bloomstack. It runs your website. It's the e-commerce store. If you have a retail store, it's a POS system. If you have drivers, it's doing delivery management. If you have education programs, it has education and courses and teachers and certifications. If on and on and on, I could talk a little while on this stuff. But the idea is that if you have all that data and it's in a homogeneous way, in other words, it's not stored in this format, meaning this in one system, but it's in a different format, meaning something different in another system. You can do analytics on this stuff that you never dreamed of in these other platforms, even using things like Zapier to connect things together. You just can't come close because you missed the metadata. Every time a transaction happens, there's a lot of data around that transaction. Who did the transaction? What time of day was the transaction done? Did anything happen while it was happening? All that data is stored in Bloomstack, so it gives you a lot of capabilities. And sometime in 2023, Bloomstack will be, to use one of those buzzwords I joked about, but will be machine learning enabled. So our vision really is once people are using Bloomstack and the system knows their business well, the system itself will be able to suggest improvements, suggest things that can make your business even better. That's the real vision for a few years down the road. So we're working on a unicorn here. That's it.
No, I mean, this all sounds great. Like I said, as I'm getting into the industry, I see not even getting into the industry, as I'm really getting into the supply chain and everything else. I see such a need for what you're doing. And, even when I look at the supply chain, my philosophy is always less is more. The less people I have to deal with and manage, the better, right? Same with software. The less software I have to deal with and manage, the better. If it's one interface, it's one program that can do more and it does it well, then I'm all for it, man. Eric, I loved meeting you 2 years ago. I'm very excited that we got to do this again. I'm glad that you're involved in C Lab, and hopefully when you get back from India, we'll be coming to some of the events, man. It's been fun.
Hey, and actually, I don't think you were there, were you, when I won the C Lab pitch competition?
No, I was not. I was
in Miami. You guys had that pitch competition, and Bloomstack won it. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, I think that was actually right before I started getting involved because we did. Yeah, that was like September. It was right around the conference time.
That's right. Yeah.
I was at that conference. I was the unemployed guy at that conference asking everybody for a job. Things have since changed, but
it's going well now.
Yeah, man. So Eric, before I let you go, let's get any social media out there, any websites, anything else you want to promote.
Man, we're easy. Again, it's not really about us. It's about the clients. But what I will say, though, is to everybody listening, if you know an operator, if you know somebody struggling with their IT crap and trying to figure out how to put it together, at least send them to bloomstack.com. There's actually an open demo on there. You don't have to sign up for anything to see how it is and what it does. But we're looking for our next partners. We haven't selected them yet. There's a simple app on the website, bloomstack.com, under the business partner program. And throw in an application. Let us talk to you. I can't promise, we're only picking 3. So, we're not going to pick a lot of people, but we'd be happy to talk to you. And there's a lot of stuff that I know from being in the industry that I can help people anyway, point them in the right direction. So we're just here really trying to get this right. And help a lot of people. And we know if we do that well, we're not going to have to worry about anything.
Very cool, man. Well, like I said,
I'm sorry. The last thing, since you brought it up, anybody that really likes what they heard and is looking for a unicorn, www.wefunder.com/Bloomstack for about the next 10 hours. You can actually invest and buy equity in Bloomstack. We only had a small goal when we started, about 200,000. We doubled that during the campaign, and I think we're getting close to 500,000, which is where we'd like to cap it before we close it tonight. So yeah, check that out.
Awesome. Well, guys, check that out. You have till 11 p.m. tonight, so the next 12 and a half hours. Eric, thank you for joining me, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And thank you to everybody at home. This has been another episode of Elevate Your Grind, probably the only episode we're going to get this week. Join us next week on Tuesday. We have Jamie Evans. I've been really excited about this episode. She is the cannabis sommelier. She is going to teach us how to leverage the terpene profiles in cannabis to do food and wine pairing. So this is something that I've been really pumped about. I accidentally paired a strain of cannabis with a wine one time, and it was an amazing experience. So I've been chasing the dragon, trying to replicate that. So folks, we will be back here next week. Enjoy your week. Enjoy your weekend. And until then, we'll see you next time.